Welcome, Steve Shashihara.
Thanks. It's a real pleasure to be here. I sometimes dread if I have to get the slot to speak right before a great meal, but I guess when you talk to supply chain folks, you don't have to worry that much. You guys clearly know how to feed yourselves and supply that info. I have a presentation to give. I'm going to try to beat the clock on it, and largely I have a presentation we give to executives on what optimization is. I have some slides that represent cases that I can talk through, and that's my cheat. If I'm running a little bit slow, I can talk to them really quickly. I'm very happy just to lecture, but in a group like this, I really would love to answer questions as we go along. Jerry said, don't run long, but if you have the time, answer questions afterward. I'm very happy to. We also threw out some literature at you. We're pushing this optimization book, and I think we have some copies for sale, but that's not really why I'm here. We do have, for those of you who don't want to buy the book, we have the Cliff Notes version of it, so you have to buy it. It's right here. And I'm very pleased to have scooped the Harvard Business Review with the European Financial Review in the spring. So this is our big data contribution, and sort of summarizes some of the topics we have. And also, because we want to be able to write off this evening, one of my associates will probably be coming here a little bit late, Gene Adam, wanted us to throw in a product brochure. This is actually a service offering of ours. It is optimization, but it's a shameless piece of pitch selling about product mix optimization. So the spirit of the rest of the stuff is not to be one big infomercial. It's more trying to be educational. So let me just get started. Basically, the foundational theory of our firm is that we believe that organizations that we care about can and should make better decisions. Now, 95% of what I do, and it sounds like what a lot of you do, is this is in a commercial context, so business to business. But I don't believe that optimization or better decision making is certainly limited to business. Certainly, government at all levels could be making better decisions. Not-for-profits, volunteer organizations. And I think one of my purposes in trying to evangelize optimization is to infect at least one person in this room with the same disease that we have, which is you see optimization opportunities everywhere. And any place that you see an organization making decisions, I think there's an optimization opportunity. So I think that I'd like to start by saying that if you improve decision making, you're going to improve performance. I don't think that seems shocking, but it does come at a certain slant, because as Jerry sort of intimated in his intro, over the last 10, 20, and for people like me, and Jerry, 30 years, we've had a lot of things that go in that box. If you improve quality, you'll improve, obviously, if you improve financial management, if you reduce risk, etc. So I'm not saying that we have the only thing that goes in that box, but the point of this talk is to talk about improving decision making. And indeed, I'd like to say that a leader, and that doesn't necessarily mean, could be, doesn't have to necessarily be the CEO at the top, the CFO at the top, Chief Operating Officer at the top. You can be people up and down, but if you're leading yourself, if you're leading 5 people, if you're in the department, I think a leader's job is to improve the decision-making of their organization. I know CEOs who are running not small organizations, but they literally believe that the way that they're going to help their organization the best is to make all the hardest decisions themselves. And they're going to, by God, they're going to work, they're going to know, they're going to read the books, and they're going to single-handedly rescue their own organizations by making those decisions. And I can be that person, maybe a lot of you can be that person, but if you look at someone else, and it's not you, you have the luxury of saying, you're not really doing your organization the best. It's admirable what you're trying to do, but if you can improve its ability to make decisions, that's a much better legacy than trying to make the decisions for them. What happens when I have this little glove? I was acting 20 years younger than I am, and I fell outdoor skating, and I hurt my hand. Now, luckily, it wasn't broken, it was a hand. What happens if you're the leader and you're laid up for a little while? You're in the hospital. What happens if a hurricane happens? What happens if you're not there to make the decisions, but you have an organization there? If you've trained the organization to make decisions, that's a great legacy to give an organization. Now, if organizations can and should make better decisions, what's the elevator? What's the soundbite version? And we say analytics and optimization. Part of this presentation is to explain what that is, I'd like to just say as an intro, I think these are the two of the most powerful tools available to organizations today, and they are largely unexploited. And I'll try to substantiate that. To summarize what I hope you'll get out of this presentation today, I hope you'll be able to answer what the most important product of any organization is, and I'll do that early. Secondly, and most importantly for me, if you walk out of this meeting and you cannot define optimization, it's a word that everyone's heard of, but most people I know have a vague feeling about it, and this is a total failure, and I am take full responsibility as a speaker. I've not done you a service, but you should be able to know what optimization is, or at least what one person's opinion of it is. And I do have some case studies to walk through, which I can narrate. Okay, I'd like to start with Professor Dan Kahneman from Princeton. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dan Kahneman or heard of him. He's quite a rock star in Princeton, but we're not in Princeton right now. A lot of people mistakenly introduce him. I've seen him introduced, or you know, as he's a talking head on TV programs, as a professor of economics at Princeton. He's actually a professor of psychology. You know, right? Because he won the Nobel Prize in economics, so they think he must be an economics person. But he's a psychologist, and what he did, and to win that level of prize, he created studies. Largely they award you for a lifetime's worth of work, but his main work that won the award was he had all these really very interesting studies, and it largely gave scientific proof around things that I think most of us would affirm is common sense in the case. In other words, when people are making decisions, there are systematic biases that we have. Well, he was able to, using experiments, to give real experimental evidence that this is the case, and also to establish certain terms for these different biases. So I have a few to share with you. One is anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is the tendency, technically, to overweight anchor a piece of evidence. But in most people, when they explain it, if you Google this and read it, most people will be a little bit more, they'll say, generally, as human beings, we tend to anchor the first piece of evidence that we're given. So a lot of the studies are things like, how much should this go for? The first price you hear is going to have more. This is a used car. I'm thinking it's worth $10,000. What do you think? You're going to, that piece of evidence, that $10,000, is going to have a lot more, lower than $10,000, higher than $10,000, way higher, way lower. But bias in anchoring, human bias anchoring, one piece of data, what one person thinks shouldn't matter, but it is. It's part of what makes us human. But I think one of the things that I'm not a psychiatrist, but is this something about our wiring? Is it cultural? But it's demonstrable. You can see it over and over again that people do anchoring biases. A second is confirmation bias. Very common in my experience in corporations. Confirmation bias is you come into something feeling that you're open-minded, but you have a certain viewpoint. And confirmation bias is with all the evidence and all the experts, you tend to seek out and affirm and like evidence that sort of confirms what your going-in position was. And that's especially easy, for example, and I don't mean to get political on you, certainly not this week, but in the national debate, there were people that took data and had PhDs and had talking heads, and the evidence seemed to prove exactly the opposite. What gets the economy started? Slash taxes, raise taxes, spend this way. So if you are predisposed to a certain position, you don't have to be evil or wrong or crazy. We have a human bias toward believing the evidence a little bit more that confirms what we said. That's confirmation bias. And a lot of times when people see a company that made a really colossally awful strategic decision, people say, what were they thinking? Didn't they look at the data? Well, in many cases, oh yeah, they looked at data, but it confirmed what they thought. This is a risk worth taking, right? Bandwagon effect, the notion that the more people believe it, the more likely it is to be the case, which, you know, the Petri dish doesn't necessarily know who's looking at it, so a lot of things are like that. Framing effect, a wonderful one where, depending on how you ask the question, depends on how people answer. A dummied-down version of Kahneman's experiment is that if you ask people, would you like this drug that has a 95% survival rate versus this drug that has a 5% death rate? You know, people don't like death. So you can frame things in a lot of ways, can't you? And I know that organizations like Gallup and you know, these opinion survey companies, they have to be very careful about how they ask questions. And the best that they could do, and I've talked to these people, is, well, we can't really prove that this is a neutral question, but we can ask the question phrased the same way each year. At least we can do that. And so that's not wiggling around. But depending on how you ask something, because we all know you could, in fact, some people try to do this, to manipulate the answer. But it's a framing effect, because it shouldn't matter how you ask the question, but it does affect it. It's a bias. And just if I could, and with one last, and there are dozens of biases, this is one of my favorites. The bias blind spot is the belief that other people have these biases, but not me. I know that comes to me. So, okay. So Dan Kahneman, he spent his whole life in academia. He's a first-class academic, won the Nobel Prize, and I'm very pleased to say that a lot of people with that, I mean, that's the ultimate, as you guys all know, and usually you get it at the end of your life. And a lot of times you can just basically lunch on that and do whatever you want to. And he's chosen to kind of flip over and go into mainstream. I've never been an academic. I've been a business person my whole life, but he has decided he can now go over and try to help businesses, help society, etc. And his first books, I reprinted them a little bit, have words like the word heuristics in them. I think if the word heuristics in there, it's probably not going to be a bestseller. But his most recent book that came out last year is Thinking Fast and Slow. So it's written for ordinary people. There's no fancy words or mathematics. Thinking Fast and Slow, how we make decisions. It's a really neat book. Dan Kahneman gave an interview, it's on YouTube, to McKinsey, the famous management consulting firm. And I'm excerpting from this, and I thought it was terrific. And he said, think of an organization as a factory for producing decisions. And this is the answer to the first question, so you're already a third through the program. What's the most important product of any organization? Well, according to Dan Kahneman, it's decisions. He says it's a factory that produces decisions at all different levels. And he said, and I'm used to going on in quite a lot of detail here. You guys could teach this, so I want to lay it right at your laps, okay? If you think of an organization as a factory for producing decisions, that's a byproduct. And whether you agree it's the most important, it's certainly very important, okay? Shouldn't there be a rigor around producing that product? We've had total quality, Six Sigma, Lean, quite a number to help reduce variability, to do control, statistical process control, on and on, right? But do we do that for decisions? We do not. We've never done that, right? So we believe there are mythologies like you hire great decision makers, great leaders, or but we don't seem to. And I'm not saying that it's not good to hire great decision makers, great leaders. I'm saying, but you want to hire creative people and hardworking people in manufacturing as well. But you also impose systems to try to measure and improve the quality of the output. What about a system to improve the quality of decision making? So anyhow, I find that wonderful, and I want to take that as a launching point for my talk. Okay, I think most of us would find uncontroversial that decisions have a big impact on performance. They do not have the exclusive impact on performance. There's a lot of exogenous factors, luck, market conditions, but certainly given two organizations in the same circumstance, one that is making better decisions statistically is going to be better than the other. It's sort of a motherhood and apple pie issue. Okay, if decisions are the factory's greatest output, what's the input coming in? Okay, so if the output are decisions, what's the input? Well, you might say data. And hopefully that's the case in most modern corporations, or most modern organizations, that they're making decisions based on data. Largely on data, somewhat on data, but they're making data-based decisions. Okay? But to be a little nitpicky, but there's a point here, you don't actually make decisions based on data. You make decisions based on information. There's a distinction between data and information. And the thing that transfers data into information, that converts it, is analytics and optimization. So that is the thing that turns data into information. To explain that a little bit, and I'm just going to touch on it, but it's important for me to frame this. I'd like to point to Competing on Analytics by Tom Davenport. Tom Davenport deserves the credit for single-handedly creating analytics as a buzzword and really lifting it to the popular interest. A couple of things that astound me about this is one, how recent it was. At least in my field, we've been hearing analytics it seems like it's been around forever, and he just published in 2007, fairly recently. And the second is that how humble Tom is about this contribution. He puts in the introduction to this book sort of the story of computing analytics. And he said, you know, if you look at him, he's a serial book writer, he's an academic. His previous book was on how eyeballs are the new currency in the social media world. He got a call from SAS, the statistical analysis company. They said, hey, professor, can you interview a bunch of companies? You know, we just want to see how better companies are using our products and other products. So he did this, and he wrote a very nice little article for the Harvard Business Review. And he says in the introduction, and then it went viral. It was crazy. I mean, I thought I did a good job, but I never thought. This isn't his life's work. This was a gig. But it went bonkers. And then they said, quick, write a book. So he wrote this book. And the book did even better, right? So my point is not to take anything away from Tom Davenport, but I think this is a case where a very competent person put in writing something that was in the water and people were ready to read. Not someone came from, totally dragged us from where we were to some new place. He just was the guy who said, you know, there's something that is resonating with people. Let me capture this. And I'm the same way about optimization. I didn't invent it. I have no claims that way. But my hope is that I can be a little Tom Davenport on optimization and be part of the thing that gets things into the heads of people like yourselves, people that, you know, are not professional optimizers probably, but are people who, if you wouldn't attend an event like this if you weren't always on the prowl looking for new ideas, if that was in your personal agenda or your company's agenda, looking for possible edges. In his book, in Tom Davenport's book, he starts with an illustration, and this isn't very readable in the back room, but it's just an illustration. He says, analytics is very software-oriented, and here's a diagram, a diagrammatic version of the thing that SAS gave, and SAS did give to us. So it's basically, it's 8 things, and they're of increasing advantage and increasing intelligence. So the things higher up on the stack give you better advantage, and they give you more intelligence. At the bottom, standard reports, ad hoc reports, query drill down, alerts, statistical analysis, forecasting, predictive analysis, and optimization at the top. Okay? Most people who've written on this subject, and there's a lot of people, agree, and what most of us have done is broken this into basically 3 broad categories, because, you know, 8's a little hard to remember, and there's a magic to 3. And basically the 3 categories have been descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, and optimization. So the bottom 5 are descriptive, the next 2 are predictive, and the third is optimization. Well, if optimization is at the very top and is the most valuable, it kind of begs the question, what is it? And that's the purpose of my talk. Okay. I'm going to give you a 5-point on optimization, and I'll go at it in a little bit more detail, but this is the second part of my 3 parts. If this doesn't connect with you, then at least we all got some good shrimp and steak items. So optimization is 5 things. First of all, it's improved decision making. Secondly, it uses software. If you don't have the software, you don't have optimization. It gives you more of what you want, and in optimization terms, we call it follows an objective function. You have to tell the optimization software, this is what I'm trying to achieve. So something that's just following rules is not really trying to achieve anything, it's just following rules. So it has to be looking for something. It evaluates millions, billions, or trillions of combinations, and then gives you explicit recommendations for action. So if I could reduce this down to 1 word, 1 litmus test, it's this underlying word recommendations. If you have software and it doesn't give you a recommendation, it is not optimization. It might be a very valuable piece of software. So in a lot of organizations, you have the IT department rolling out very proudly an executive dashboard. A lot of times these executive dashboards have things like green light, bad or good, red light, bad, yellow light in between. And they show you meters, they show you metrics, they show you the hot spots, they show you the dangers, they show you the trends, but they are not making any recommendations. So it's good stuff. But it is, frankly, lower on the stack of analytics. It might be descriptive, it might even be predictive. This is what's happening. But optimization is known for making a recommendation. This is what you should do about it. So red is bad, but what do you think I should do about it? Optimization actually tries to do that. So I'm gonna link this into not an analogy, but I think this is actually optimization in work. Okay, so this is in your car or many of our cars, okay? Okay, so descriptive analytics is the odometer and the speedometer in your car. And the odometer tells you how far you come, right? Sort of, and the speedometer tells you how fast you're going right now. And there's a lot of things in our companies like that. The speedometer is saying, this is what's happening right at this instant. The odometer says, this is everything in the past. This is accounting-ish. It's looking backwards. But the speedometer is saying, I'm going to snapshot to you right at this instant that you are going 60 miles an hour. Okay? That's descriptive. Predictive in a car, some of us have this, but this thing, in some fancier cars, will say, you have 228 miles to empty. That's actually not so hard to do, because if it can figure out how much gas is in your tank, not hard, it knows your average mileage, right? It can just divide and say, okay, well, based on your average mileage and the amount of gas you have, that ends up being 228 miles. Now, if you've been getting excellent mileage over the last tank, like you've been on the highway, and you're about to go off highway, then this number may be wrong. Maybe they're a little conservative with it, and vice versa, etc. But it's a prediction. It's a forecast, right? So that is not kind of like what predictive analytics is. That is predictive analytics. It's giving you a forecast, okay? Now, before I get to optimization, I just want to say, one of the main impediments I get when I'm talking about optimization to enthusiastic executives is they tell me, Steve, you know, optimization is great, but, you know, we're struggling for this. We'd love to have this, and we're not ready for that. Okay? I believe that if you know what optimization is and you reach for it, that you may or may not get it, but you're going to get a lot more here. Okay? So anyhow, so let me talk about optimization. Optimization is the GPS in your car. So optimization is the thing, or on your phone, that says, I want to get from here to there. Okay? So the objective function, first of all, is I want to get there. And I want to get there using the shortest path, or the least amount of time. Now, you, optimization, make a recommendation. How do I get there? Go down here, turn right, turn there. Okay? So it has to provide a recommendation. It has to have an objective function. It's trying millions of combinations. There are millions of different ways you can put the street together, right? But it's making a recommendation. Okay? Interestingly, and this is a point that I'd like to make to a room like this, it's a more sophisticated room, okay? A lot of times when people say, I want forecasting, I want predictive analytics, okay? They have a framing error. They're selling for too little. So if I say, this is excellent, I want to know how many miles to go until empty. Why are you asking that question? Because I want to know, I'm kind of pressed for time, I want to know if I have to pull over and get gas, or whether I can make it to my destination. Okay? But you're inferring a lot. Like, where's the nearest gas station? And you know, if you could ask an optimizer, you could say, what I really want to know is, when am I going to get there? And if the optimization had something like this, you could say, the optimization, maybe next year's model, maybe a 5-year Garmin from now, maybe an iPhone, might say, I'm highly recommending that you take the next exit off and get gas. Because I know you only have 228 miles left, and the next gas station, because I got this map, is way up there, and you are going to run out of gas. Or the next gas station is way out of your route. So this one is right off the freeway, get it, live with it, but this is your fastest one. So optimization has that sort of flavor. Now I don't know a map that does that right now, but that's the flavor of optimization. And one of the things that's so wonderful and crazy to me is I remember, and this was when I was a kid back in school, I remember not too long ago, this kind of routing was a state-of-the-art problem, and you use big computers for it. And now it's on your iPhone. Now, or whatever phone you happen to have. There are two mapping softwares that do this that I personally use. One is Google's, great product. Another is from TomTom. And one of the things I love about TomTom that's crazy to me is it doesn't make a round trip to a server. It's downloaded on my phone like a PC app. Okay, so the entire map of the United States is somehow on this phone, and all the processing is done here. So I can turn it off of 3G or wireless, and it can still route me. Unlike the Google one. I feel like, that is insane. You fit that whole thing on this? Right? So that gives you a real, the whole United States. You know, as I go to like another state, you know, I fly around. So I go to California and says, wait while we download California. No, it's there. Holy cow. That's amazing. So it just gives you a flavor of optimization. It's so even for someone like me, a practitioner, it's gone overnight from incredibly esoteric. Only the giantest, biggest companies, sure, an oil company would use it to figure out, how to allocate its pipelines, or an electric company how to allocate the grid. But now you can use it practically anywhere. You can carry it around in your pocket for something simpler, like what's the best way to get to that effect. So we can use it in our companies in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't require massive spend. Okay, so that's optimization. I like to say, in our companies, we're basically making decisions, let's say at 3 different levels. We're making strategic decisions that have long-term impact. Typically, executives make those sort of decisions. We're making tactical decisions with managers, the midterm, and we're making operational decisions where the decisions are right now, and really where the road needs to go. And I believe optimization is applicable in all 3 of those. I'm going to, in my cases now, I'm going to jump, I have one more slide, I'm going to jump to the cases, and I have a couple here that I just want to touch on, but most of my examples are operational. Okay. I picked those because I thought, this room might appreciate that more. But I want to touch on a strategic one, because a lot of times people have the misconception that, okay, this is great for operations, but it's not really something to do strategy or anything kind of high end. And I disagree. In your packet, I have approximately this next slide. And this is one way that we give companies internally, and I invite you to take this with you, a way to look for optimization opportunities in your own company. So one thing that we think about is what are assets in your company that are important. Now, a little apology, and that's why the little apologetic quotes around assets. I don't mean asset the way a GAAP accountant would. So it doesn't have to appear on your balance sheet. What I mean by asset is something valuable that you have some control over. So you don't own your customers, you don't own your shoppers. They're not on your balance sheet, but they're certainly an asset of your organization. But that also includes your own vendors and your employees. So when you optimize, you're not necessarily just limited to scheduling your own employees. You're also saying, when one of my shoppers comes into the front gate of my store or my website, if one of my vendors pulls up, optimizing how they're routed or what they're showing or what they're offered. I'm trying to maximize the time of that valuable asset, that people. Similarly, materials, vehicles, etc. And the decision classes that you make about them: assignment, who gets what, production, how much to make, get, have, scheduling, network routing, pricing, policy creation. And there is still a lot of meat on the bones by taking the classic left-hand column item and marrying it with the classic right-hand column that you think of. So when you think of like production acquisition, you think of, okay, inventory levels. So I have raw materials or I have finished goods. How much should I have? Okay, and there's still plenty of meat on the bone there. However, you can get some really cool stuff when you take a non-traditional category and you apply it over here too. So you say, how do we schedule our shifts? How do we figure out allocation and so forth? So you get a lot of interesting effects that way. Okay, let me jump to my cases. I'm going to do a very fast squeeze over the first 3. They're all in the book for your further reading, but I just want to just talk to them a little bit. How many went on? Okay. Okay. Good. I love this case study, and I'm glad that it was released for us. This is McDonald's Japan. McDonald's has about 300,000 restaurants worldwide. Some are company stores, some are franchises, but about 30,000 of them are located in Japan. So that's a very big territory for them. 10% of their plant. And every year, and what this case is about, McDonald's has to decide how to allocate its capital budget. Now, there aren't a whole lot of strategic things that are more important than how to spend money, because you can come up with a lot of great sounding strategies about what our vision statement's going to be, or what our mission's going to be, or but how you spend your money, how you spend your capital, that's pretty strategic. Okay, so the way McDonald's does and did things is they have this council, what I would call the council of elders, and they basically have this conference room, and every year they meet, and people present different proposals, and they go around and then they vote. Now, this being Japan, there's not one person at the end of the table that makes all the decision. They reach consensus on how to allocate the funds. Without going too much into the case, You could imagine anchoring bias, and you could imagine confirmation bias, right? And even though they all work for the same company, and particularly the Japanese context, they really feel like, hey, we're all in this together. How do you allocate, why are there these 10 specific people? So one person might be the person whose territory is Tokyo. Another might be the surrounding areas, and so forth. So you can imagine that the Tokyo person might say, you know, we should spend more money in the urban areas. Or someone whose area seems to be having struggling, they might say, we need new products. We need, or our products are fine, we need to upgrade our stores, or we need to get to the youth group, or whatever. So each of these 10, you would expect a good corporation like McDonald's to pick a good swath of 10 people that are going to have complementary perspectives. If they're all going to have the same perspective, you only need one person, or two, right? But it does create a challenge. How do you get these 10 people to agree? And so in the case, this young guy from Chicago, a colleague and friend of mine, built a model. So he built an optimization model and said, I don't know what we're trying to accomplish. I can think of lots of great things, growth sales, reduce costs, expand markets, blah, blah, but I'll build you this model. And I'll bring it to the meeting. And as you guys ask for different things, we'll run the model and we'll give you recommendations. Okay, according to this model, this is what you should do. This is where you should spend the money. Okay. And the results are that it grew revenue $100 million. Now, a question I asked him, he said, I thought I was being very clever, but he said, he thinks pretty much everyone he's ever told this story to has asked exactly the same question. How do you know it was the model that gave you the $100 million? Well, we won't deny that, say, that revenues went up $100 million, but how do we know it was the decisions of the model? Maybe the model, maybe you would have made $200 million if you could take the models. Maybe you could have thrown darts on a dartboard and just people wanted burgers all of a sudden. I mean, to what do you attribute this to? He said, here's the answer that the Japanese felt comfortable. He's an employee of McDonald's, but he's an American. He said, part of what I showed them was how, in order for the model to work, it has to make forecasts. So every time you do another combination, it forecasts what's going to happen. So when we got decision making, I also showed them, here are the forecasts for each of your 10 segments, what's going to happen. Okay? 8 of the 10 are going to grow by 10%, 2 are going to be flat. He said, a year later, when we met again, I reminded them that we had shown the forecast, and we looked back, and he said, not only did we nail, it was suspiciously good. It was almost too good. But he said, but our forecast almost perfectly matched what the model said. So he said, it was a lot easier in year 2. The question is, how do you get past year 1? But he said, once we did this, then everyone started to relax and say, you know what, this no longer has to be personality. And while I think, I can say this as a person of Japanese extraction, I think this is extremely excruciating in Japanese culture. I think it's true almost everywhere there are people. And that is, when am I attacking someone's idea, and when am I attacking them? When am I attacking their suggestion, and when am I attacking their judgment? So to some extent, putting this all in a model allows us to talk without really saying, well, I think it's a dumb idea, or why would we do that? I mean, just say, well, the model's saying this. Now, we can agree or disagree, the model's valid. But at least it gets a different, at least it gets to the conversation, what are we actually trying to maximize? We can't maximize everything. It's going to be very difficult to slash taxes and increase spending at a federal level, right? It's across the board. Everyone gets lower taxes, everything we spend more, everything we want we spend more on. It's going to be a tough thing to pull off. And so, what we're willing to spend less on, who we're willing to tax more or less, getting that conversation going before you decide, okay, which we all agree we want to grow the economy. We all agree we want to grow our company's revenues. We all agree we want to do better customer service. But having a vocabulary for that's really useful. Let me do a second one. I put this, it's a personal favorite. I don't think it's quite as relevant for this room. It may have some relevance, but this is a pricing application. And the reason that I personally love this case, once again from the book, is because I was shocked to find out that Marriott wasn't doing this. Okay, so in our business, when we think of using optimization for pricing, we all instantly think airlines, hotels. They're the first, they did it a decade before anyone even thought of it. So yes, it's annoying, but when you call an airline or book a hotel room, they're varying the price depending on how many rooms they have left and time of day and a lot of other things. okay? And they're saying, but I think a lot of people like this, look, when the plane takes off, any unsold seats, it's just, it's just unsold, right? After the night's over, the unused rooms are unused. However, why should we give them away when people are willing to pay more? So that's the whole basis of yield management. So I was shocked to find that Marriott actually had an optimization opportunity, okay? And here was the optimization opportunity. Marriott had made itself famous doing yield management and had obliterated a lot of other hotel chains. Remember when Howard Johnson's was in, Howard Johnson's and Marriott have a very similar story. They started about the same time. They were fighting neck and neck. We largely don't remember them anymore. One of the things that Marriott did to bury them was they could buy hotel chains, put in yield management, and figure out what the pricing did. But they had done this on individual rooms. They had never done it for group sales. So group sales were, you call someone up and they talk to a live salesperson, sometimes an 800 number, who has an Excel spreadsheet that they were emailed the week prior. And they negotiate. And what the spreadsheet is the lowest price they can get. But they would use their own acumen. So a group optimizer was built to say, here's what you should offer. And its factory, what was done was, we took the smartest, best people in the field and said, what are all the factors you should consider? Well, it's a holiday weekend, and blah, 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 blah. And lots of things like, we're not actually trying to sell the event, we're trying to sell the rooms. So certain kinds of events, people book a lot of hotel rooms. You've got to factor that all in. Also, are they a serial booker, right? I mean, in other words, is this like this group? I mean, this is a good group to have because you have multiple meetings. You may only have one big, wedding or bar mitzvah. Maybe you have two. But a group like this that keeps booking, I mean, that's someone you really want. You want to give them a premium weekend if they're trying for it. Anyhow, the interesting thing about this case is that not only did it increase money for group sales, but also did during a recession. So it was a very good case to them of how, even in good times we make iffy decisions, but when things really changed, as we all recall, things went south a lot faster than most people would have expected. Suddenly, usually for people that are making decisions based on spreadsheets and rules of thumb, those are all calibrated, designed around better times and something that can make tough times. The model doesn't know. The model just recalculate and say, okay, drop prices. But we would tend to hang on to higher prices too long. Or then panic and give it all away. It's like, they still need to have the event. Don't give it away. So the model just, once you get everyone with cool heads to come up with the game rules and you calibrate it, the model just does what the model does. Okay. At the operational level, I want to give one example which may be closer to the manufacturing side of this room. There is a large printer, and when I wrote the book, I said this is the largest private printing company in the United States. There were three large ones, R. Donnelly, Quad, and Feathercore. And Quad was the private one in Wisconsin. And they do large runs, so magazines, but textbooks. So maybe magazines are kind of disappearing, but they do textbooks. And for example, I learned this piece of trivia, but the state of Texas they have this very good, allegedly this very good committee that picks the textbooks for the state of Texas. So every year, everyone comes up with a brand new physics textbook or a math textbook, and this gold medal committee picks the one that everyone in Texas will use. And because everyone else says, that's a pretty good system, a lot of other states just buy whatever, even if you're not organized by state, they just buy whatever text is. So if you win the Texas contest, life's great. And these textbooks, they're like $80 or $100, it's crazy. But anyhow, I mean, you think some of these subjects, like what's happened the last year, but somehow they managed to come out with a new textbook every year. But anyhow, the funny thing for Quads, they're telling me, so we'll have three book companies telling us that they have a pretty good feeling that they're the one. So we print about 300% more than we need. So we have to kind of normalize it to go. Only one's going to win, but they do these long runs. If back in the day, a couple years ago, Oprah featured something, suddenly everyone wants this book. They suddenly have to go just print out, just great. So it's a really interesting business. And they brought us in and they said, look, you guys are the math guys. See these printing presses. And they told us how many millions they cost and how important it was if one goes offline, et cetera. So they said, here, optimize this. Okay. Now, when we looked at it, we thought, oh, great, this is the call-up. We couldn't do anything for it. Okay. they've spent the last 50 or 100 years trying to optimize their presses. And a lot of their jobs are designed to run on those presses. So I'm not a professional book author. This is my one book. When we were writing this, they told us how many pages it had to be. 200 and something. They said, this is how many words you get, and this is how many pages you get. Because they know when they cut it up to this size book, this is how many pages you get. So the jobs are designed to run on the presses. So there isn't any waste. So it's going to be hard to optimize that when there's no waste, right? But what we stumbled across, luckily for us, is the binding lines. So after you print stuff, you've got to bind it. And they are crazy complicated. So here's something I didn't know. Okay, and I bet a lot of you don't know this, but maybe some of you know. Okay. I think we all know that when you go to a web page and you've been surfing around a lot and haven't been clearing out your cache, that the ads that appear are custom tailored for you, right? And if you type certain words over here, it figures that out, puts them over there. Okay. What most of us probably don't know, I didn't know until this, is our magazines are the same way. So if I went to any of your homes and we took out Time magazine or Newsweek magazine or Good Housekeeping magazine, the ads will be different. Okay, so if they buy all these, the magazine buy all these databases. So if they think you've got young kids, you're going to see, diaper ads. If they think you have pets, you're going to see dog food ads. They literally make every single magazine individual. So the same machine takes these different ad pages. The content's the same. They take different ad pages, they sew it up, and the little dot matrixy looking address on it. The same binding machine does that, and here's, like I said, this is getting, I'm now up to 2002. So what's the next innovation? To save postal costs, and as we all know, magazines are really in tough shape. Okay, what they do is they do bundling. So if you have a small circulation magazine, like German Shepherd magazine or something like that, they print up small numbers of copies, but they bind it next to someone who's subscribed to Time or Newsweek. And the Postal Service gives them a break by putting them together. So the binding machine is doing all of this. It's taking all these pages and sorting and putting them together. And so, we could optimize that. Because what they were doing was very, very manual, very inefficient. It would take a scheduler, and they had 4 that were their primo schedulers. But it would take them the better part of a day to get a schedule ready for tomorrow. They would basically spend a whole day scheduling, give it over to production, and then start scheduling the next day. And that was it. And so one thing that I like to show is the difference between the human schedule and the optimized schedule. And to someone that does this, if I blew it up, the human being looks at the optimized schedule and goes, that's way better. I mean, to us, it's just a bunch of dots. And my point is, if you do something, it's at a very, very high level of detail. For the rest of us, they're just dots on a page. We were basically able to reduce their stopovers and changeovers by 10%. And for those of you in manufacturing, I mean, you are a hero if you get 1 or 2% these days off a practical athlete. And 10% is in the category of surreal. There's probably something wrong with that number. But and the reason that a lot of people feel that way is because they believe their own utilization is 98, 99%. So how could you possibly get 10% on something that's 98% utilized? Well, for those of us that spend our careers in operations, that these numbers are somewhat padded. Everyone has a little bit of a padding factor. So when I say this job is a 1-hour job, I mean give me an hour and I'll get this job printed for you, right? That doesn't mean that all 60 minutes will be taken, because sometimes it is 65 minutes and sometimes it's 55 minutes, but this is a 1-hour job. So if you go to a lot of assets that people are saying, this is 99.96327%, if you look at it, it's like, gee, it seems to be idle a lot of the time. So how could it be 99.n when it seems to be idle a lot of the time? Well, there's setup, there's tear down, there's cleaning, that's all included in that number. So if you pack things together differently, sometimes you say, well, you don't have to tear down if you have 3 jobs that are all essentially the same kind of job. And so using their own way of looking at it, you can really compress things. But if someone's just scheduling with a spreadsheet, saying, no, do this, well, then they do the best they can. But those are, a lot of times the numbers are based on that. Okay, I just got a few pictures I just want to talk, and then I'll break it. I'll answer any questions. We kept it together. Okay. I'm using this as a high-end case. It's a bit of a brag, but I'm very proud of it. Every NetJets flight is the largest private aviation flight the world's owned by Berkshire Hathaway. Every flight of their 600 jets worldwide use our software to take off and land. And the point I'm trying to make is, you would think that something like NetJets already had optimization. I mean, for God's sakes, right? They didn't. In fact, there was a brochure they have. I still have a copy, but I don't feel comfortable sharing it. But it's a brochure that talked about, you know, if you're a rich person, why you should get NetJets. And one paragraph there talks about their IT system. Most of it's pictures of jets and things like that. One paragraph talks about their IT system called IntelliJet, which is what it's called. But it used the word optimization 3 times. It optimizes, it optimizes, it optimizes. And so in many of your companies, you may think, well, production schedule, we've got SAP, we've got optimization. Okay. All I'm saying is, you might. But I go to places like NetJets. In my book, I've got Intel, I've got McDonald's. Sit next to the people actually doing it and tell me, are they basically looking at a screen and dragging things around with a mouse, or with, you know, I mean, is it actually telling them what to do, or is it validating after they've made a decision whether it's valid or not? You know, almost every case I found, the Intella part of IntelliJet was not that it said, oh, here, do this and then go there. It was saying, oh, you can't land the jet there because the runway's too short. You have to pick a different jet. So, you know, whenever you hear someone brag about how their schedulers or production managers, their pricing people have been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and that's our competitive advantage, that we have these great people. I'm not against great people, but that's a bit of a clue. If you've got optimization, why are you bragging about the person who's been doing it for 15 or 20 years? They must be bringing a lot of head knowledge into this. And much as we like that person, I mean, do they have systematic biases in how they're doing it? Most schedules, in my experience, and I have a lot of it, are last week's schedule or last month's schedule brought forward and edited. Right? I mean, you know, and people go, oh, well, you balance all these factors. You know, it's like, well, if you're balancing all these factors, how come I don't see them on your screen? I don't see any dollar numbers. I just see a job number, customer number. I mean, you know, if you're balancing all this stuff, you know, well, sometimes, well, because it's not on the screen, because, you know, back in the day we only had 80 columns, but it's up here. I know this. I know which our big customers are, I know which our small customers are. It's like, yeah, but now if you have to, like, balance between a reliable customer that we've had forever and an emerging customer, how do you balance that off? Like, are you comfortable the person scheduling that is making the right trade-off? And are they in touch with what they're saying upstairs or 2 floors over in market, right? So the nice thing about doing optimization is you can capture all the fine level, crazy, you gotta think and know this detail of operations, but you can also capture a lot of the strategy that people are saying, we are basically, you know, we are missing new accounts because we go through this loop of, oh, small guy, of course they're small, they're a new account. And so we give them the back, you know, and then we don't outperform. So we've got to bring them forward. Or you might be doing the opposite. You might be saying, we are so eager to service the brand new accounts that we're dropping the ball on the bigger accounts, etc. The Wall Street Journal, traditional print, we write the software that shuffles the paper every time someone wants to put an ad in there. And I like to extract this case because it's an industry that most people would say, even for the Wall Street Journal, well, you poor slobs, your industry's over. I mean, that's like newspapers. I mean, will they even exist in the current form of years? Well, in the meantime, they employ a lot of people. And they you know, I mean, so, you know, you don't necessarily just use optimization for e-commerce, .web, you know, social media networks. It can be for pretty ordinary stuff. And just play your hand better, right? But in the old days, the Wall Street Journal, and I'll say this lovingly as a client, was such a kingmaker and so powerful that they could get away with stuff like, if you want to take out an ad in the paper, they would say, great, well, we'll see whether we get it in. And they'll know about 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning. You'll know the next morning when you get your paper and open it. But they were so powerful that you said, we'll try. And then you would use your agency to say something like, the chairman really would like to see this in there, and my career would like to see that in there. So whatever you could do for us, I'd be very happy. We can even willing to pay extra. No, they don't take extra. What do you want? We'll do what we can, right? And so that used to be the game. That's why we would hire a big agency to some extent because they had clout with the journal, right? When the bottom fell out of the economy and when, you know, and the trend away from it, then people, the buyer now has power. And they say, if you can't give me a confirm on the phone right now, USA Today, New York Times, they seem to really want my business. So you got to kind of tell me now. And they had literally 2 people that scheduled the Wall Street Journal right? And they've been doing it for 20 years, but every night they had these playbooks, and they would figure out which playbook came closest to the paper they're trying to build, and then they would edit it. And people used to say over and over again, part of the cost justification is if Tony and Jerry die, I don't know who's going to lay out the journal. The Wall Street Journal, I don't know who's going to lay it out, because like, without those guys, I mean, they tell stories about how when one was sick and blah, blah, blah. So that was part of the cost justification. Now, I know that seems kind of odd, but we're talking about, this is not the United States' #1 business paper. This is the United States' #1 paper. It sells more copies than any other paper, not any other business paper, any other paper. So this is not a two-bit operation. These are not stupid people. But in organizations that are a lot less noteworthy, you see a lot of similar behavior. So, what I'm telling you is at the very top of the food chain, optimization still has a lot of potential, and a lot of other organizations do quite a bit more so. And let's see, I want to finish the one case, and okay. My colleague has said you have a couple minutes, but this case comes, and this is not one of ours. Okay, this is a company called Jan DeWitt Florist. Okay, now. Jan DeWitt Florist is the largest manufacturer of lilies in South America. I think he has 60 employees. His revenue is about $30 million. Okay. And Jan DeWitt, the founder-owner, is the owner, master scheduler, chief salesperson, makes all the planning decisions. Someone says, oh, we want you to grow these bulbs, these wholesale bulbs. He says yes or no. He decides where they're going to plant, etc. Okay? This is him. So what he did was, he had been reading something like this, some optimization stuff, and he got a local professor to come and put all this stuff in an optimization program. And because he wasn't a big corporation, and he just followed it. He would put it on his PC, and he followed it. And he was able to grow revenues next year by 26%, profit margins increased by 32%, and he had one person. What it told him were things like, you're growing too many things. And I run a small business. I know what that's like. Anytime someone offers, like, here, you grow these bulbs? Sure. Next year, when you have too much room, you still grow them. Because it's like, hey, But the professor knew nothing about lilies, about farming. Anything that the professor and the model knew, he taught them. Well, this is how much things cost, you don't understand. But when he put the whole thing together, they said, oh, well, you're growing too many things. And this you shouldn't do here, this you should say no to. And he was willing to say, yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, and by just following the thing's recommendations, he's saved quite a bit. And it's a one-man show. He has employees, but they're all kind of manual laborers. He was the whole back office. He had a PC and a professor. So, like I said, you can get optimization on something like this. You don't have to boil the ocean and have this giant multi-mega-year ERP project. And for many people that we work with, we actually take data from their ERP, help them with one decision, and then they either key it back in or we uplink it. It's not competing against ERP. Just a lot of the ERP magic is getting everything standardized and online data, but not necessarily in improving decision making. It's just saying we're empowering people to make better decisions by giving them information they need, but not necessarily trying to make better decisions. So that's basically my presentation. Thank you very much for having me. I'd like to end where I started. I think it's all about making better decision making. The organizations that we care about, the organizations that we work for, the ones that we volunteer in, they can make systematically better decisions. But we need to have, in my opinion, more modern help than just rah-rah stuff. Let's all work hard, let's all work smart, let's all think clever. And optimization, and that's part of my spiel, it's something that has been around for a while, but it's pretty new. I mean, there are lots of places where you can bring it in, and there are solvers that fit in the Excel spreadsheet that's on your laptop. There are optimization solvers. You just have to learn how to use it and convince people to take problems and turn it into optimization problems. So thank you, everyone. And I'm looking forward to meeting some of you afterwards, too. Are there any questions that I can answer, or more about what optimization is and isn't? Or
I'll have that
Yes,
one.
please.
One of the issues about, when you create a model and then you run it through like software, the issue is that you got to get people to actually follow the recommendation, because you have this essentially this software black box.
Yes.
I mean, how many times have we gone through the GPS and said, there's no way I'm following that direction, and we override the GPS. So it's sort of like, it's great that you have this optimization, but then how do you get people to believe in to actually do this?
What a fantastic question. And I want to tell you that if you were a room full of people that do what I do, if you were optimization people, and some of you may do something, okay, I would have given you a slightly different talk, and my talk is exactly about that. The talk is how you solve what's called human-in-the-loop optimization. Just briefly, the goal of what we're doing is to help people make better decisions, not to optimize their problem. What I was taught, and what a lot of people were taught academically, is how to take a bunch of data, put it into an algorithm, and come up with the best solution. But as a consultant and as a business person, I know what I'm trying to do is take people who are doing something a certain way and improve how they're doing it. So precisely to your question, it is almost a total disaster to take all the data that you can find, put it in a big black box, and spew out an answer and say, here's the answer, and I can't really give you a lot of explanation about where this comes from, because you have to know the math, you have to be a computer science person. So there are a bunch of techniques. One is, look for a decision that they're making that is merely trying different combinations. Have them teach you how to score them. And then you say, would you like me to try millions of more combinations? Don't oversell what you're doing. But if you said, for example, I can take an existing street map, I can try all different paths, and I can show you the shortest distance in miles, would that be of value to you? You're not saying, I know traffic, you're just saying, would that be helpful to you? If someone's saying, yeah, I'm trying to figure out, I have a bunch of resources, I have a bunch of teachers, I have a bunch of nurses, I have a bunch of staff, I have a bunch of assignments, and I'm trying to jiggle them around and try to maximize things. You say, well, if you show me the game you're trying to play, show me the spreadsheet, I can do something that will try more combinations, and it'll score it the way you want to. And if that's not helpful, then look for something else. But let me help you beat a game. That, if you're playing Scrabble, I can try all combinations of those 7 tiles and look it up in the dictionary. Would that help you? That'd be called cheating, but sure. So look at someone who's doing something that they find valuable and say, you can just start by saying, I can try more combinations in a couple of seconds than you will try in hours, just because I'm a computer. I can just do lots and lots and lots of combinations. So that's one door. And there are other techniques that we have for doors in, but very good question and very much to the point, and a very smart thing to ask, because a lot of optimization has crashed and burned because they had a professor come in, or they had a software company come in, and they just claimed we could save 8 or 10%, but then people aren't actually using it, because you have to kind of build it up. To summarize the answer, okay, people have to trust it. If you're putting a human in the loop problem, it's defined as the person who was responsible for making the decision before is still responsible, but you're giving this tool to help them make a better decision, but it's still their responsibility. So they have to trust this tool. And I think, as we all know, trust is earned very slowly. Unless you're a fool, you don't just trust everything openly quickly. You have to have little examples that you can say, okay, I trust that, it worked. And you build it up. Trust also dissipates very quickly. So it takes a long time to build up. It's lost very quickly. General Petraeus just went from hero to goodnik in one day. One day, right? So, any project has to build trust up the way. You can't just come in and say, gee, I want a Nobel Prize, so trust me. You say, okay, well, you're super bright, but show me this thing working in my application. So the more you can do to show not just what it's recommending, but why, that really helps people. That's a great question. Can I answer any other questions or anything else? Yes, sure, please.
So the technology behind the optimization systems, if you will, is obviously designed by people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it susceptible to bias the same way that people are then in its decision making?
Let me answer at 2 levels, okay? On one level, I'm tempted to say yes, but on one level, so what optimization technology does is it tries all combinations and scores them. So there's no bias there. But the bias is, well, who says that's the right way to score it? Well, there is bias there. So what counts as a win? You have to reduce things to a scoring system. Okay? So there is bias there. But one thing I'd say is the purpose of optimization is to improve how we're doing things, not to achieve infinite perfection. Right? So you say, well, what I'm doing is I'm trying to just pick the combination that has the least number of things. So if I have a room like this and I have a wedding, let's say we have a wedding, we have 15 tables. I'm trying to seat people at different seats. But there's trillions of combinations. So how would you say, just show me the rules? Well, don't sit these people together and put these people close to here. So I'll just shuffle all combinations. I'll say, okay, for the rules you gave me, this scores the highest. If you don't like it, say, teach me another rule. Like, oh, see, this is the problem. It's my grandmother, I didn't tell you this, and she's white bad, and she hates that. So, okay, so I'll put that in the rule, and then hit solve, and we'll just resolve the thing. So there is no bias in the thing that is trying combinations and scoring them. There is bias in the scoring system. But if what we're doing is we're taking the scoring system that you already use, that's a good thing. And what we find in almost every case, if I was a pure management consultant and not an optimization person, we'd probably be able to declare victory on just getting the scoring system. Because almost everyone, they score using fairly fuzzy concepts. Like, on one hand, we want to keep our costs down, on the other hand, we want to delight the customer. But we need that to be an optimizer. I need that turned down into points. I need a count. So I've got to turn this into a score. And so it doesn't, don't send me the PowerPoint deck, right? Don't show me the vision card, because that's a good start, but I'm going to turn this into points, and I'm going to see if we can turn this into like a video game. So when you do this, do you get more points or fewer points? If I can do that, then I can try combinations and win. And like I said, you say, well, it's kind of awkward turning things into points. Yeah, well, but remember, we're trying to improve on how they're doing it today, not try to. Ultimately, there's a lot of factors, but you have human beings that are using this as their optimizer. They're basically scoring in their head. And if you have 20 people scheduling, or 20 people doing production planning, or 20 people pricing, or take the best one and try to take their brains and say, let's turn this into because there's also the 10 worst ones too, and they're just like whatever, right? Whatever. This looks good. Can I answer any questions? Yes. Yes.
I'm kind of struggling with, okay, you've got the optimizer, but there's Tom and Harry at the Wall Street Journal, they've got a lot of experience, they've got a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
And kind of what I'm thinking is, well, they still need to make a contribution. We just can't let them go.
That's right.
Run the optimizer.
That's right.
Maybe they work on optimizing the optimizer for scoring or something like that. Basically, the question is, where's experience and wisdom come in that you really, sometimes that's difficult to model.
Quite a bit. There's quite a bit. Let me take a step back from the question, because I think it's a good question, but answer it more directly. Okay. The human side of this optimization problem is very important. And if the project looks like, feels like to them that the whole purpose is to siphon their brain and then lay them off, unless they are in the kind of culture like the Japanese culture where you commit carry suicide when you're no longer valued to your lord, you might not get the highest level of cooperation from these people, right? So you have to think about that as part of your problem. It's like, I want the company to make more money. I don't want to be threatening to these people in any way. I want to get the value. So that's a tricky problem. Okay. More specifically, though, what do they do when they do this? One thing that I've found is that, I'm just going to say this straight. Okay, there are people in organizations that have this sort of passive-aggressive wiring, and yes, they're very dangerous and they're hard to please. The better people, okay, will find other things to do of high value. So, in credit scoring, for many years, you had rooms full of people that basically read applications and credit scored it, and they had a little card that they ran down. Then you had supervisors who made sure they didn't screw up. Then you had managers to make sure they didn't screw up. Well, that can be replaced by a computer program. Okay. But how do you convince these people that they can realize that? That's a tough problem, okay? But in those organizations, as they went and interviewed them, the people that were very generous and saying, oh, half of what we're doing is just clerical. We can, but they're the ones that are now running those places, right? Because they feel like, I don't want to be the person who's basically just a human, decision tree. I mean, it's so easy what we're doing, right? right? But here are a couple of things that are just hard to turn into a decision tree. You've got to have a certain sense, you know. You know, looking at one's own organization or looking at an organization trying to help, yeah, picking where this thing can work is tough. So let me give you, to be tangible, a couple of my tricks. One of the places that we look for, we always say to our staff, like, yes, you want to help people, but pick your projects. If you find a place where people are desperate, that's good. So a classic during the recession was, this company bought the other company, okay? So the good news is we still have a job. The bad news is they doubled the amount of work, and they laid off half the people from the acquired acquisition, and we're supposed to schedule them. And people's like, you know, like, I won't have my job next year. If I mean, I can't work this many hours, I don't know this. So when people want your help, that's really helpful, rather than trying to barge in and say, stand aside, I can save 8%. It's like, we need total help here because we're literally just trying to put it together. And so it's helpful. Now, at some point, one gets a reputation. You say, like, when these people go in, they are not lying. They're not claiming that they're here to optimize. They're really looking to write, bad reviews about people. The people that sponsor them, their stuff seems to get better. So, as you know, that success has many failures, but as many fathers with failures an orphan. Well, success has many fathers, or parents, I suppose. So, if you're successful, you'll find more people that are leaning into it. And for people that just want to fight it into death, you don't have to, in my view, life's short, you don't have to go in there and fight that, because there's a million other reasons they're going to fail. But if someone calls you and says, look, bring me that optimization stuff, I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to give it a look, because I'm looking for an edge here, and it's a pretty tough business. Where every one of my clients, whether they're selling jets or they're selling newspapers, say, we're a commodity. At some level, we're a commodity. So back in the day, but now this isn't back in the day. This is a really tough business. And so a lot of the better clients are saying, I need help. I need an edge. Our people are working pretty hard. We just can't keep up with change. And part of the big data thing is, how do you take all these external places of data? The real joke, the real irony, the real laugh, the real hoot is that a lot of IT people are just putting the final brick on this beautiful data warehouse project they spent the last 10 years building. But it's all internal data, right? They took all these different sorts of data and had a script just in time to have this tsunami of external data coming at them. And they're going like, oh no. It's like someone who's putting the last touches on their sandcastle, and they look over their shoulder and there's giant tidal waves coming at them, right? They've spent 10 years building this. So the problem is that they've defined data as the data inside. And part of the big data thing is the data outside is pretty important. So how many people have good data in their data warehouse about what their competitors are doing? Almost no one. They know every movement, every widget did, right? How much every little piece costs. But they don't know what their competitors are paying for things. They don't know what supply looks like. So they have spreadsheets, and they have conference calls, and they have people coming in, but it's not in the data warehouse. But you think, isn't that even more important to our pricing decisions or buying decisions than how much we paid for it? It's like how much someone else paid for it is probably, and recently it's kind of, and is it trending? So that's what. Now I'm a positive thinker. I think, oh good, because there's a lot more work to do. And, I do work, so I like that. But it is kind of a weird switch for people to think about it that way. It's not how do you take all the data. All data is important, and how do you catalog it and normalize it and clean it and put a database. It's assume there is more data than you can possibly capture or use right now, and it's growing. So you need to have a whole different skill set, which is finding data and using it, getting some value out of it, and then cycle. And probably the data you're using last year is probably not valuable anymore, because it's like MySpace, and now it's Facebook, and now next year it'll be something else. I mean, if you're a consumer, you don't want to spend too much time like cleaning the MySpace data, because no one will care about them. Twitter is the big thing right now for a lot of media. Maybe there's something that replaces it in different things. So it's less about capturing every byte and cataloging, more about how can we get this stuff on the run and be a little bit better than our competitors. And it's just a new way of looking at things. And frankly, for a lot of us, I would put myself in this category that come from sort of a science engineering background. It's disconcerting. Because you don't want to. You don't want to be fast and loose and fluid. Those are kind of good things, but you kind of want to have things stationary, so you kind of build them and manufacture them. But that's not the world we're living in. The world we're living in is very, very fast and fluid. And so I think all